She was only 10 mute since birth. Her twin sister couldn't walk, but saw the world clearer than most. Together, they stood at the edge of a country road, abandoned, forgotten, and holding nothing but each other. When a lone, kind-eyed stranger pulled over, their lives changed forever. But he had no idea. One of these girls carried a secret that would lead them all to a truth buried deep in the heart of a billionaire's sorrow. If you believe in second chances, quiet miracles, and the kind of love that finds you when you're not looking, then this story is for you. Take a deep breath, make yourself comfortable, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that speak straight to the heart. The Texas sun hung low like a molten coin, bleeding amber light across the open plains. Dust curled in the air behind Jack Ryland's aging pickup as it rattled down the narrow country road. His left arm rested on the window, catching the breeze, while the right gripped the steering wheel with unconscious familiarity. He had driven this road hundreds of times, every curve of it etched into his memory like an old scar. But today, something was different. Up ahead, just beyond the bend, where the wheat met the horizon, a flicker of motion drew his eye. He slowed instinctively. As the truck coasted forward, he saw them. 2 girls. One was pushing a wheelchair with both hands, her steps slow and strained. The girl in the chair sat stiffly, her face pale beneath a curtain of tangled chestnut hair. Neither could have been older than 10. There was no adult in sight. Jack's brows furrowed. Before he could think, he threw the truck into park and stepped out, his boots crunching on gravel. That's when he heard it, the low guttural growl of an engine approaching from behind the bend. A truck. Big. Fast. And the girls were in its path. "Hey!" he shouted, sprinting forward. The girl pushing the wheelchair looked up wide-eyed. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She tried to push harder, but her legs buckled. The other girl turned her head toward the sound of the engine. Jack saw it in her face, the panic. She clutched the arms of the wheelchair with trembling fingers. The truck was coming too fast to stop. Jack didn't hesitate. He sprinted, the hot air tearing through his lungs. In a single fluid motion, he swooped down and scooped the girl from behind the wheelchair into his arms. Without stopping, he grabbed the chair by the handle and pulled it alongside him as he dove for the ditch. The roar of the oncoming vehicle exploded past them. A split second later, wind whipping Jack's shirt against his chest like a flag in a storm. The truck kept going, its driver oblivious. Jack lay panting on the ground, cradling the trembling child in his arms, the wheelchair tilted against the dry grass. Silence followed. Thick. Heavy. Sacred. "You okay?" he asked, gently lifting his head. The girl blinked at him. She didn't speak. Her eyes, the soft gray of an overcast morning, seemed to look through him more than at him. The girl in the chair reached for her sister's hand and held it tightly. "She doesn't talk," she said quietly. "Not since she was 4. Jack's gaze flicked to the girl in the chair. Her voice was calm, deliberate, too mature for her age. "And you?" asked. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Just tired?" Jack stood, slowly lifting the quiet girl, as if she weighed no more than a bundle of feathers. He gently placed her back into the wheelchair. The other girl adjusted her sister's sweater, pulling it up over her shoulders, with habitual care. Jack knelt before them. "Where are your parents?" The one in the wheelchair looked down. The standing girl hesitated. "We don't really have any. Not anymore." The words hit Jack harder than he expected. "What's your name?" he asked. "I'm Eden," said the girl in the chair. "And she's Willa. Eden and Willa." The names suited them, soft, simple, timeless. Jack exhaled. "Well, Eden and Willa, I don't think I can leave you here by the road." Eden looked up. "We weren't supposed to be here. We were trying to find someone." Jack tilted his head. Willa reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a child's drawing, crude but unmistakable. A small trailer surrounded by pine trees. A woman with long, dark hair. 2 girls holding hands beneath a crescent moon. She came once, Eden whispered. To the place they kept us. She wasn't allowed to stay, but she promised she'd find us again. Jack studied the drawing, the sadness in the lines. Where were you before this home? Not really a home, Eden said softly. They called it a care center. But it was just people waiting for us to go away. Willa nodded, drawing a finger across her lips, then her heart. A sign Jack didn't understand, but felt in his bones. We left last night, Eden continued. We were going to follow the map Willa remembered, but the wheel on her chair broke. We couldn't go any farther. Jack swallowed. The girls had survived the night unprotected, pushing a broken wheelchair along a rural highway. And now they were here, barely standing, hearts full of someone who might or might not exist. It would have been easier to walk away, to call the authorities, to let the system take over. But he remembered how his own son's hand used to fit in his palm, how it felt to lose everything. Jack stood. All right. You're coming with me. Eden's eyes widened. You don't have to. I know I don't, he said. But I'm not going to leave 2 girls with more strength in their hearts than most men I've ever met. He wheeled the chair toward his truck, lifted Willa into the front seat, then folded the chair into the bed. Eden sat quietly beside her sister, her fingers still locked in Willa's hand. As the truck pulled away, dusk settled over the fields behind them, long shadows stretching across the road. For the first time in years, Jack Ryland didn't feel like he was driving alone. The cabin stood at the edge of a thicket, worn but sturdy like its owner. A wraparound porch creaked beneath Jack's boots as he carried Eden's wheelchair up the steps. Willa walked close behind her small hand, gripping the frayed strap of her backpack like it contained the last thread tying her to something safe. Inside the house smelled faintly of pine wood and old leather. Dust motes floated in the amber light that filtered through the kitchen window. It wasn't much, but it was home, at least for Jack. Bathrooms through there, Jack said, pointing to a narrow hallway. You both hungry? Eden nodded. A little. Jack rustled around the pantry, pulled down a jar of peanut butter, and found some crackers. It wasn't a meal, but it was what he had. Eden helped Willa onto a stool at the kitchen counter. She was precise, careful, her every movement anchored by an older sister instinct that seemed to pulse from her like a second heartbeat. Jack watched them quietly. He'd seen a lot of kids in his time. As a former football coach and father, he had learned to read them. But these 2, they didn't move like children who had only known love. They moved like survivors. When Eden finished feeding Willa a few small bites, she looked up. Are we going to stay here tonight? Jack hesitated. That's up to you, if you're comfortable. It's just me and the dog. He's out hunting squirrels, probably. We're not scared, Eden said. I didn't think you were. He brought over a pitcher of water and set it in front of them. I should call someone. Jack added, more to himself than to them. There are laws about this. Eden's face tensed. We've been in places with laws. That's where they hit Willa. Jack froze. What they said, she didn't listen. But she did. She always listens, better than anyone. But she can't talk. So they thought it meant she wasn't trying. His hands clenched into fists before he could stop them. They hit her. Eden nodded slowly. And they called me trouble because I asked too many questions. So we stopped talking. We stopped asking. We just stayed quiet. Jack sat down across from them. Willa's eyes followed him, calm and unblinking. She reached into her backpack again and pulled out a small sketchbook. She flipped to a page and turned it toward him. It was a picture of a girl herself, sitting in a dark room with barred windows. Outside the window, another version of herself waited with a suitcase. The moon watched from above like a guardian no one else believed in. Jack stared at the drawing. It wasn't just good, it was haunting. She remembers everything Eden whispered. She sees it in pictures. That's how she talks. She's an artist, Jack murmured. She's a survivor. Jack leaned back in his chair and rubbed his hands down his face. He knew what the system could be like. The bureaucracy, the overcrowded shelters, the way good intentions too often gave way to neglect. But still, what could he do? Take them in? Pretend the law didn't exist? Or was this one of those moments, the kind you don't plan for? But that shape, you ever had pancakes? He asked suddenly. Eden blinked. What pancakes? I make a mean batch, she smiled. Not in years. Well, tomorrow morning you'll have the best stack in Texas. Willa smiled faintly, barely perceptible. But it was there. That night, Jack gave them the guest room. He pulled out clean sheets and a quilt he hadn't used in years. The room was small, with a window that looked out over the trees and an old bookshelf lined with books his wife used to read to their son. Eden helped Willa change into a t-shirt Jack had offered them. The sleeves draped past her elbows, and she laughed silently, her body shaking with breathless giggles. Jack stood in the hallway listening to them. A sound he hadn't heard in years, the lightness of children safe and alive. As he turned to go back to his room, he noticed something on the floor near the door. A tiny folded paper. He picked it up and opened it. It was a note in a child's handwriting, unsteady and slanted. Thank you for not asking us to leave. We won't break anything. We just want to stay together. Eden and Willa Jack stood there for a long while, holding the note in his calloused hand, eyes stinging for reasons he couldn't quite name. He returned to the living room, poured himself a small glass of bourbon, and sat in the old armchair. The fire crackled in the hearth, faint and comforting. He looked toward the hallway and said quietly to the dark, "Maybe it's not them who need saving." Morning came with the soft hum of cicadas and the golden light of Texas slipping through the blinds. Jack stood over the stove in a plain white t-shirt and jeans, flipping pancakes in his cast-iron skillet, the scent of browned butter filling the kitchen. He hadn't cooked like this in years. The last time he made pancakes, it was for a boy who liked his with peanut butter and bananas, and who'd sat cross-legged on the counter, waiting with syrup already in hand. Jack blinked the memory away. That life was gone. But this morning felt different. Not a replacement, never that. More like a glimmer, a possibility. He heard soft footsteps. Willa appeared, first oversized flannel shirt brushing her knees, sketchbook tucked under one arm. Her eyes met his, cautious but clear. "Good morning," Jack said. "Hope you're hungry." Willa made a small hand gesture, flat hand to mouth, then a little thumbs up. He smiled. "I'll take that as a yes." Eden came in behind her, wheeling herself steadily across the hardwood floor. She was wearing a clean shirt and had braided Willa's hair with remarkable precision. "You're early risers," Jack said, plating up a stack of golden pancakes. "We didn't sleep much," Eden replied, her voice quiet but unwavering. "Too many new sounds." "Yeah," Jack said. "This house has a language of its own." He handed her a plate and watched as Willa slid into the bench beside her sister. She waited until Eden took the first bite before she picked up her fork. It was a subtle ritual, protective, synchronized, unspoken. Halfway through breakfast, Willa reached for her sketchbook. She flipped to a fresh page and began drawing without hesitation, her hand moving swiftly, her eyes glancing up at Jack from time to time. He didn't interrupt. When she was done, she turned the sketch toward him. It was the kitchen, sketched from her seat, the stove, the window, the breakfast table, and at the center of it all was Jack, holding a spatula caught mid-laugh. It wasn't just a drawing. It was a memory etched in real time. Jack swallowed hard. You're something else, kid. She draws what she remembers, Eden said softly. So she doesn't lose it. We've lost too many things already. Jack leaned on the table. You two ever been to school? We were supposed to, Eden said, but the center didn't think it was worth the paperwork. They taught us how to fold laundry instead. Jack felt his stomach turn. Who was supposed to check in on you? No one, Eden said. Or at least, no one who stayed longer than a week. The ones who cared didn't last. The others didn't notice when Willa stopped talking. Or when I started. Jack's jaw tightened. He tried to imagine a world where kids like Eden and Willa were forgotten, swept aside because they didn't fit the mold. But he didn't have to imagine too hard. He'd seen it. His late wife, Sarah, had worked in child advocacy. She used to come home, defeated, eyes heavy with the weight of other people's children, children who slipped through cracks so wide you could drive a truck through them. Jack stared at the girls in front of him. They were brave, but not in the movie hero sense. This was a different kind of bravery, one that came from enduring, adapting, surviving, without losing their ability to care for each other. He stood up suddenly. Come with me, he said. They followed him out into the backyard, where tall grass swayed in the breeze, and the trees stretched like sentinels overhead. Off to one side sat a small shed, paint-peeling door slightly ajar. Jack walked over and pulled the door open. Inside were old tools, planks of wood, a rusty bicycle, and a workbench covered in dust. This used to be my son's place, he said, voice thick, his project shed. He was a builder, made birdhouses and little toy wagons. Eden looked around, her eyes softening. Did he live here long? Jack paused. 7 years. That's all we got. Neither girl said anything. They didn't need to. The silence between them held more respect than words ever could. I was thinking, Jack continued, maybe we could turn this into something for you. A space to paint. Or whatever you want. Willa blinked up at him, then looked around the shed, already mapping it out in her mind. She stepped inside, ran her fingers along the wooden table and nodded. Jack turned to Eden. And for you, I was thinking I could build a ramp off the porch, make it easier to get in and out. Maybe even convert part of the truck if we need to get to town. Eden looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Why are you doing this? Jack knelt beside her. Because you deserve it. Because I think you've had to fight too hard for too long. And maybe this is where that stops. Her chin quivered just slightly before she looked away. Jack stood up, clapped his hands. All right. First things first. This place needs cleaning. You two up for it? Eden nodded. Willa gave a small thumbs up. And just like that, the day began, not with rescue or charity or a grand gesture, but with 3 people clearing out a forgotten shed, breathing new purpose into old wood, and building something that didn't have a name yet, but already felt like home. That night, as the wind moved softly through the trees, the cabin glowed warm from within. Jack sat alone by the fireplace, a quiet bourbon in his hand, and a familiar ache settling into his chest. The girls were asleep, or at least silent, behind the guest room door. He hadn't heard a sound in hours. He stared into the fire, its orange tongues dancing like memories. On the mantel above him sat a picture frame turned face down. He hadn't touched it in years. Until now. He reached for it, hand steady but slow, and turned it over. It was Sarah and their son, Caleb. The photo had been taken 2 weeks before the accident. Caleb was missing one of his front teeth and grinning like it was the greatest thing in the world. Sarah's eyes had been filled with something he hadn't seen since: hope, possibility, the kind of faith that things would work out. Jack's throat tightened. He hadn't cried in a long time. Not when he buried them. Not when he sold off their clothes. Not when the nights got so quiet he could hear the house breathing. But tonight, with 2 girls asleep down the hall, girls who had no right to trust him, and yet somehow did his armor began to crack. He wiped a tear away with the heel of his hand. That's when he heard the softest creak behind him. Turning, he saw Eden. She sat in her chair dressed in one of his old flannel shirts, her hair a mess of waves and loose braids. She didn't say anything, just watched him. "You should be asleep," Jack said, trying for casual. "I couldn't," she said. Too many thoughts. He gestured toward the other armchair. She rolled herself over, stopping a few feet away, and rested her arms on the wheels. "I used to stay up like this at the center," she said, listening to Willa breathe, making sure she didn't cry in her sleep. Jack nodded. "You're protective." "She's all I have," Eden replied. "But lately, it feels like maybe we're not alone anymore." He didn't know what to say to that. The quiet was so thick it pressed against his chest. "I saw the photo," Eden said gently. "On the mantel." Jack looked down. "Yeah, that's my boy. And my wife, I'm sorry. Me too." She wheeled herself a little closer. Her eyes flickered with something more than curiosity, something that looked a lot like understanding. "My mom used to say grief is like a river," she murmured. "You don't cross it. You just learn to float." Jack smiled faintly. "That's smart." She was smart. I don't remember everything about her, just the feeling of her hands. She used to hold my face when I was scared. Like this, Eden reached out, placed her palm gently on Jack's hand. The moment she touched him, he froze. It wasn't just the gesture, it was what came with it. There was no pity in it, no awkwardness, only presence. Only someone reaching through silence to say, "I know what it means to lose and still keep going." Jack looked into her eyes, gray-blue, stormy, deep. "You're something else, Eden," he whispered. She lowered her hand slowly. "People look at me and see what I can't do. But Willa, she sees what I feel. And you didn't run when you saw us. That's rare." Jack leaned back, swallowing thickly. "You don't know how many times I've wanted to run, from everything." "But you didn't," she said. "And that means something." They sat like that for a while, the fire snapping quietly between them. Then Jack cleared his throat. "I've been thinking. Maybe we could enroll you two in school. There's a charter down in Lubbock that has inclusion programs. They've got speech therapy art rooms and even adaptive sports." Eden raised an eyebrow. "You already looked this up?" "Maybe," Jack admitted. "That's a big deal. I figure you girls deserve the same chances as anybody else." Eden tilted her head. "What if they say no? Then we find someone who says yes." Eden gave a rare smile. "You really don't give up easy." "Do you?" Jack chuckled. "I try not to." She wheeled back slowly. "You should rest. You've been carrying more than you let on." Jack looked at her curiously. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been carrying mine too." She disappeared down the hallway, leaving Jack with the photo frame, the fading fire, and a silence that no longer felt empty, but full. The next morning, Willa was already on the porch when Jack came out. She sat on the swing knees, drawn-up sketchbook balanced across her legs. She looked up and handed him a drawing without a word. It was a picture of the living room, Jack in the armchair, Eden in her wheelchair beside him, and between them, a fire glowing bright. But there was more behind Jack. Faint, but unmistakable, was the outline of a boy. A little boy, hand on his father's shoulder, smiling. Jack stared at it, breath caught in his throat. Willa reached out and touched the drawing, gently tapping the spot where the boy stood. Then she pointed at Jack's chest, a simple gesture. No words needed. "He's still with you." Jack looked at her eyes, shining. "Thank you," he whispered. Willa smiled. The sky above Pine Hollow shimmered with summer heat. Jack's truck bumped along the gravel road toward town. Windows rolled down, the warm wind tangling his hair. Eden sat beside him, sunglasses slightly too big for her face, arms folded across her lap. Willa sat in the backseat sketchbook and hand legs curled up, gaze locked on the passing trees. It had been 3 weeks since he found them on the road. 3 weeks since his house, once sealed by grief, had filled with quiet conversations, shared meals and the sounds of pencil on paper and wheelchair wheels on hardwood. Jack was still adjusting. The girls had adapted quicker than he expected. Eden took on chores without asking. Willa organized the kitchen drawers by color and category. They were efficient, silent, and observant, like they'd learned long ago that taking up too much space came with consequences. Today, Jack was taking them into town for the first time. There was a hardware store stop on the list, and then a detour to the local library. Eden's eyes had lit up when he'd mentioned books. Willa had simply drawn one. As they pulled into the lot behind the store, Jack parked beside a long silver trailer with weathered siding. A clothesline sagged from a nearby tree, dotted with faded shirts and socks drying in the sun. "Someone lives there?" Eden asked. "Yeah," Jack said, stepping out. "Her name's Marla. She used to work with my wife, Sarah, at the county clinic. Nurse, I think. Quiet but kind." Willa was already peering through the truck window at the trailer. Her sketchbook lay open across her knees, pencil hovering just above the paper. Jack helped Eden out and unfolded her chair. As he pushed her toward the store entrance, he noticed something odd. Marla's front door was slightly ajar. A pale curtain fluttered like a breath. No movement. No sound. Inside the hardware store, Jack left the girls in the small reading corner while he grabbed bolts, screws, and a new latch for the shed. When he returned 15 minutes later, Willa had drawn a perfect rendition of the trailer, with a woman standing behind the curtain, watching. "Did she wave at you?" Jack asked, eyeing the sketch. Willa shook her head slowly. Eden glanced at the picture, frowning. "She's been watching us." "She's probably just curious," Jack replied. "But I'll check in on her." Later that afternoon, with the girls inside reading, Jack made his way back down the road toward Marla's trailer. He knocked twice. Nothing. He knocked again. "Marla. It's Jack Ryland." Still nothing. But the curtain twitched. He waited a beat, then turned the knob. It wasn't locked. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of lavender and dust. A single oscillating fan hummed in the corner. On the table sat a half-knitted scarf, a pair of glasses, and most notably, a newspaper clipping with a yellowed photo of 2 baby girls. Jack stepped closer. The headline read, "Twins born in secrecy controversy. Surrounds missing heir rumors." His stomach dropped. Suddenly from the bedroom, a voice cracked out. "You shouldn't be here." He turned. Marla stood in the doorway, thin with graying hair and eyes that looked older than they should have. She clutched the doorframe like it was holding her up. "I knocked," Jack said softly. "I saw the girls drawing. They said someone was watching. Marla didn't deny it. She just looked down." "You know them," Jack said. Not a question. Marla nodded once barely. Her voice was rough from disuse. "They're mine." Jack's breath caught. "You're their mother?" "Yes." He stared at her, heart pounding. "They think you're gone." "I had to let them believe that," she said. "It was the only way to keep them safe." Jack tried to steady his voice. "You want to explain that Marla moved slowly to the kitchen table, sat down, like every bone in her body hurt." "I was 24, she said, working the night shift at the clinic. Fell in love with a man who wasn't mine to have, Roderick Dane. Son of Evelyn Dane. You know her." Jack nodded. Everyone knew the Danes. Their name was on half the hospitals in Texas. "We were young and stupid," Marla continued. "When I got pregnant, he wanted to run away. Start fresh. But his mother found out. Evelyn made sure I was erased. No money. No legal claim. No name." Jack swallowed. And the girls I gave birth in a private home. 2 girls. I wanted to raise them. But Evelyn came. She offered silence in exchange for surrender. I refused. Marla's eyes glazed with unshed tears. 2 nights later, my trailer was set on fire. I barely got the girls out. After that, I disappeared. Gave them to a contact in a care center far enough away that no one would connect us. I changed my name. I stayed close, always watching. Jack felt the weight of it. All of it. They think you left them, he said. I know, her voice broke, and I'll live with that until I die. But I couldn't risk Evelyn finding them. Not until they were old enough, strong enough. Jack sat down across from her. They are. But they still need you. Marla looked at him, then really looked. You've taken care of them. I've tried, he said, but I'm not their past. You are. And you might be their future, she said, almost in a whisper. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the dry leaves. Jack stood. They deserve to hear the truth, he said. Marla closed her eyes. I'm not ready. Then get ready, Jack said, because they're stronger than you think. He walked out into the sun, heart-pounding, thoughts racing. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. And somewhere down the road, 2 girls were drawing the shape of a woman who was finally ready to be seen. That evening, the sky over Pine Hollow was bruised with purple and copper clouds. The heat had settled into the bones of the earth, leaving the world heavy and hushed. Jack stood on his porch, hands in his pockets, watching the sun sink behind the trees. Behind him, laughter echoed faintly through the screen door, the girls attempting to teach themselves a simple clapping game Eden vaguely remembered from another life. He should have felt peace. Instead, his chest carried the restless weight of knowing something that didn't belong only to him. Marla's secret. Their mother. Still alive. Still hiding. And tonight he had to decide whether to protect that secret or shatter it. Inside the house, Eden sat cross-legged on the floor, her chair tucked beside her. Willa lay on her stomach, chin resting on one arm, while the other scribbled silently across her sketch pad. They looked like sisters, should ordinary safe, full of small moments that make up something close to home. Jack cleared his throat. Can I show you 2 something? Eden glanced up. Sure. He knelt beside them with something wrapped in an old dish towel. He unfolded it slowly to reveal a sealed envelope, yellowed, crinkled hand, addressed in loopy, uncertain script. Eden tilted her head. What is that? I found it tucked into the back of a cabinet in your old backpack, Jack said carefully. I didn't mean to snoop. I was looking for crayons. Willa reached for it first. Her fingers ran across the name written on the front. To Eden and Willa. If the world lets this reach you, Eden frowned. That's my mother's handwriting, Jack nodded. I think it's time you read it. Willa sat up, moving closer to her sister. Eden took the envelope, hands trembling slightly, and slid her finger beneath the seal. The paper inside was fragile, written in faded blue ink. She began to read aloud. My sweet girls. If you are reading this, it means something survived. Maybe not me. Maybe not the story as I'd hoped to tell it. But at least this, my voice. My truth. I never left you because I stopped loving you. I left because loving you loudly would have gotten you hurt. There were people, powerful ones, who didn't want you to exist, let alone thrive. They told me to disappear. They thought fear would break me. But I never stopped watching. I watched you learn to crawl, and later I saw how you helped each other walk, one with feet, the other with heart. I watched your birthdays pass, quietly, alone. I lit candles in trailers, and kitchens, and church pews. You never left me, and I never stopped hoping I would find a way back to you. Please know every day I stayed away. I was loving you the only way I knew how. If I am still alive when this reaches you, I will come. If I am not, find each other. Find joy, and forgive me. Mom. Eden didn't cry immediately. She finished the letter, folded it back into the envelope, and held it close to her chest. Her lips parted, but nothing came. The silence was too big. Then Willa crawled into her lap, wrapped her arms around her sister, and leaned her head against Eden's heart. That broke the silence. Eden's shoulders began to shake. Jack sat beside them, arms crossed over his knees, eyes shining. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply bore witness to the ache that poured from a girl too young to hold so much history and too old to be comforted by lies. After a while, Eden whispered, "Do you think she's still out there?" "I know she is," Jack said gently. Willa looked up at him, hope widening her eyes. Eden glanced toward the window, toward the trees beyond. "Then I want to find her." Jack hesitated, and then he told them everything. He told them about the silver trailer down the road, about the woman who knitted alone in the dark, about the way she watched them not out of suspicion, but longing, about the photograph, the burned-down past, the fire that didn't take the children but did steal the chance to raise them. He told them their mother had never stopped circling their lives like a quiet moon. When he finished, the house felt still, too still. Eden looked stunned, not angry, not even confused, just stunned. "She's here?" she asked, voice fragile. Jack nodded. "She's been nearby all along, watching over you." Willa had already opened her sketchbook again. Her hands moved fast, frantic with purpose. Eden leaned over and watched as her sister began sketching a woman with tired eyes and a soft smile, arms outstretched toward two little girls reaching but not touching. Eden turned to Jack. "Can we see her?" "Soon," he said. "But she's scared, maybe more scared than you are. She shouldn't be. She knows that. But fear doesn't always listen to reason." They sat in the quiet for a while, three souls held together by an invisible thread, grief, grace, and the fragile promise of reunion. Finally, Eden spoke again. "We're not angry," she said. "At least, not yet. But we need to hear it from her." Jack nodded. "You will." She looked him straight in the eyes. "Promise me, Jack. I promise." That night, as the girls lay down to sleep, Willa tucked the drawing under her pillow. Eden placed the letter on the nightstand beside her, like a compass. And in the silver trailer down the road, Marla Quinn sat awake in her chair, staring at the same moon, unaware that two daughters she'd nearly lost forever were now ready to bring her home. 2 days passed. Marla hadn't left the trailer. Jack stopped by once, leaving a warm meal on her porch. She didn't open the door, but when he returned that evening, the plate was gone, and the spoon was washed, set gently on the steps. The girls didn't ask again, not with words. But Jack could feel their unspoken questions in every glance, in the way Eden folded and refolded the letter from their mother, in how Willa's drawings shifted from birds and trees to sketches of unfamiliar women with familiar eyes. They were waiting, and Marla was still running, just in place this time. On the third morning, Jack returned to the trailer and knocked twice. A pause, then the soft shuffle of footsteps. The door cracked open just enough for Marla's face to appear drawn and pale. "I told you I needed time." Jack nodded. "They're not children anymore, Marla, not in the ways that count. They've waited their whole lives. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to show up." Marla stared at him a moment, then stepped aside. Inside the trailer was neat but weary. It smelled of mint tea and old fabric. A dozen photos lined the far wall, pictures of trees, cloud shadows, all from afar. None of people, except one. 2 infant girls swaddled side by side in hospital blankets, their eyes wide, their mouths parted. A Polaroid, time-worn but unmistakable. Marla sat in the chair across from Jack. Her voice was hushed like it belonged in a chapel. I've imagined this moment so many times. What I would say, what they would ask. But now, I can't find the words. Try anyway, Jack said gently. She hesitated, then spoke. I didn't grow up with power or protection. I was raised in small kitchens and borrowed trailers. Everything I had, I earned twice over. When I met Roderick Dane, it felt like a movie. He was soft-spoken kind, not like the rest of his family. We kept it secret for months. I didn't care. I would have followed him anywhere. She looked down, twisting a silver ring around her finger. When I got pregnant, he asked me to run with him. We planned everything, bags packed, motel booked. But someone tipped off Evelyn. She found me first. Jack leaned forward, listening closely. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten. She just offered silence in exchange for obedience. Said if I ever showed my face again, my children would pay the price. I was 24, carrying twins, with nothing but a nursing license and a used car. I believed her. Jack's fists clenched slowly. And Roderick. He died 6 months later. A car accident. I didn't even know until I saw it in the paper. By then, I'd given birth in a private clinic under an alias. I tried to vanish, but somehow, Evelyn still found me. She paused, breathing carefully. The night I fled, there was a fire. A warning, I think. I ran barefoot from the flames with Eden and Willa in my arms. I never went back. Jack's throat tightened. I left them at a center I thought was safe. I paid for 6 months' care, gave a fake number. I watched from a distance. Always. Every birthday. Every school form. Every tear. Until they disappeared, Jack said. She nodded. That broke me. They found their way back, he said quietly. To you. Marla looked up, eyes filled with tears. Do you think they'll forgive me? I think they already have. That afternoon, Marla stepped out into the sun for the first time in months. She wore a plain dress and carried nothing but her hands, trembling and empty. Jack led her slowly up the gravel road toward his cabin. The girls were sitting on the porch swing side by side, facing the trees. They didn't turn when they heard footsteps. Marla stopped a few feet away. Eden. Willa. The names caught in the air like fireflies. Eden turned first. Willa followed, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. Marla stepped forward, voice breaking. You don't have to say anything. But I need to. I need you to know I never forgot you. Not one day. I loved you by leaving. But I stayed by loving. Eden looked at her for a long, frozen moment. Then softly, why didn't you come back? Marla's lips trembled. Because I was afraid I'd bring danger with me. Because I thought I didn't deserve a second chance. Because I didn't believe I could be what you needed. Willa stood up first, walked to her mother slowly. Then she placed a drawing in Marla's hands. It was a picture of the trailer. And 2 girls at the window. Inside the trailer was a woman, not peeking from behind curtains, but standing in the light. Marla broke. She fell to her knees and opened her arms but didn't move forward. Eden wheeled herself close and reached out. Willa joined them, a small hand resting on her mother's shoulder. The 3 of them stayed there a long time. No tears loud enough to disturb the birds, no words big enough to explain it all. But something holy passed between them, and Jack, watching from the porch, knew what it was. Not reunion, not closure. Return. The return of a mother to her daughters, and of 2 girls to something that had never truly left them. The town square in Larkspur was bustling with the low hum of a summer art fair. Local artists lined the sidewalk under white canvas tents, their tables cluttered with handmade pottery, woven baskets, and watercolors in worn frames. Children darted between booths, clutching cotton candy and juice boxes, while a folk band, strummed lazily beneath a crepe myrtle tree. It was the first time Eden and Willa had attended anything like this. Jack walked beside them, pushing Eden's chair, while Willa stayed close, her sketchbook tucked under one arm like a secret. Marla followed a few paces back, her straw hat tilted, low hands twisting nervously in front of her. She hadn't left Pine Hollow in years, but the girls had asked, no insisted that she come. "They want you to see who we are now," Eden had said that morning. "Not what you lost, but what you helped survive." They reached the youth art exhibit at the corner of the square. Jack had submitted Willa's painting anonymously. He hadn't told her. He wanted her to see it hanging in the world, wanted her to feel, maybe for the first time, that her voice had made it that far. Willa noticed immediately. Her feet slowed, her head tilted. There it was, her painting pinned to the center of the display board. The title was written in careful block letters, "The House I Remember, but Never Entered." The image was haunting in its simplicity. A large white estate stood behind wrought iron gates, shrouded in fog. At the center of the lawn, two girls stood hand in hand, facing away from the viewer. And in the tallest upstairs window, a figure stood alone, looking out with a hand on the glass. It wasn't labeled. But Marla gasped. "I know that house," she said, breath-catching. Jack turned. "You do. It's the Dane estate," she said quietly. "The one in Lubbock. I haven't seen it in 15 years, but I'd know it anywhere." Eden looked at her mother. "That's Willa's memory. She's never been inside, but she used to draw it when we were younger, always from the outside. She remembers Marla whispered what I showed her once from the highway, when she was 2. I didn't think she'd held on to it. A voice behind them interrupted. "Excuse me, is this piece for sale?" They turned to see a woman in her 60s, elegant, angular, with white gold hair pinned in a twist, and dark sunglasses perched atop her head. Her voice was refined, but curious. Her assistant, a younger man in a navy suit, stood beside her. Jack's shoulders stiffened. He recognized her from local news articles and hospital gala billboards. Evelyn Dane. Willa stood perfectly still, eyes wide. She looked at Jack, then at Eden, who took her hand. Marla stepped forward slightly, face pale but composed. Evelyn studied the painting. "There's something in this. Something hauntingly familiar." Her assistant cleared his throat. "Mrs. Dane, perhaps we should?" But she held up a hand. "No. Let me look." Her eyes scanned the canvas again. "I once lived in a house like this. The light, the angle of that window, it's uncanny." She turned to the group. "Do you know the artist?" Willa lifted her sketchbook slowly. Evelyn's eyes moved to her, then to Marla. And then, like a tide slowly crashing against the shore, her expression changed. She stared at Marla for a long time, her voice hollow. "You." Marla didn't flinch. "Yes." Evelyn took a step back. "You disappeared. You made sure of that." The square had grown quieter around them. Conversations dimmed. Somewhere behind the tents, the band still played, oblivious to the slow-motion reckoning taking place in the center of town. Jack stepped between them, slightly protective without being aggressive. Marla kept her gaze steady. "These are your granddaughters." Evelyn's lips parted, but no sound emerged. "I didn't come here for drama," Marla added. "I came for truth. And they deserve to know where they came from." Evelyn glanced at the painting again. "How old are they?" Jack said. "They look like him," she whispered. "Roderick loved them," Marla said. "You never gave him the chance to prove it." Evelyn's voice cracked just slightly. "He died before he could." "They lost him," Marla said. "They lost everything. But they didn't lose each other." Willa reached out and took Eden's hand again. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Evelyn turned to Willa and knelt before her. She looked into the girl's eyes too wise, too quiet for 10, and asked a single question. "Did you paint this for me?" Willa shook her head, then opened her sketchbook and flipped to a fresh page. With slow, deliberate strokes, she drew a hand on a window, and two smaller hands reaching up from outside. Then she turned the page sideways so that all three hands touched. Evelyn choked back a sound that was half breath, half sob. "I never meant to erase them," she whispered. "But I did, and now I want to undo what I can." Jack looked at Eden. "It's your choice, yours and Willa's." Eden stared at Evelyn. "We don't need your money." "I know. We don't need a name." "I know." But maybe, Eden said softly, "we need to hear you say you're sorry, not just to us, to her." She nodded toward Marla. Evelyn turned to her slowly. "I am," she said, voice trembling. "More than I ever thought I could be." Marla's arms crossed over her chest. "This doesn't erase anything." "No," Evelyn replied. "But maybe it starts something." Willa gently set her drawing into Evelyn's hands, then turned away, walking toward the sunlight with Eden. Marla followed Jack at her side, and Evelyn Dane remained behind, the weight of a painting in her palms and the outline of a second chance traced in pencil, and silence. The sky cracked open at midnight. Lightning split the distance beyond the hills, and thunder rolled in behind it, like the slow beat of a war drum. The rain didn't fall gently. It came with conviction, hard and cold, like a cleansing or a warning. Jack woke to the sound of Willa's bare feet padding down the hall. He sat up as she appeared in the doorway of his room, breath-shallow sketchbook clutched against her chest. "Willa," he asked, reaching to turn on the lamp. She held up the sketchbook, a hospital bed, an oxygen mask, a heart monitor flatlining. Jack's blood ran cold. "Where's your sister?" he said quickly, swinging his legs over the bed. Willa pointed toward the guest room. He ran. Inside, Eden sat in her wheelchair, face pale and eyes wide. "It's Mom," she said, voice trembling. She couldn't breathe. "I called the number on the fridge. They're on the way." Jack turned and found Marla collapsed on the floor, her body curled in on itself like a question mark. Her lips were tinged blue. Her breathing was shallow, labored. He dropped beside her. "Marla, stay with me. Look at me." She opened her eyes halfway. Recognition flickered, faint but there. "Eden," she rasped. "She's here," Jack said. "She's right here." Willa appeared beside him, her face ghost white. She reached out, slid her small fingers into her mother's hand, and held tight. Sirens howled in the distance. The hospital smelled of bleach and waiting. Jack paced the corridor, while Eden sat silently, hands folded tightly in her lap. Willa stood at the far end of the hall, drawing with a pencil she'd borrowed from the nurse's station, her back against the wall, like she needed it to hold her up. They had arrived just in time. The doctor said it was a congenital heart defect, undiagnosed and worsened by years of untreated strain. Marla had likely known something was wrong, the shortness of breath, the dizzy spells. But she'd never gone in. Jack couldn't stop thinking about the why. Why do the people who give the most think they're allowed the least? Evelyn arrived an hour later. She entered the ward in silence, dressed in slate-gray slacks and a rain-dampened blouse, her hair pinned neatly but without vanity. When she saw the girls, she didn't try to speak, just sat beside them, close enough to be near, but not enough to assume belonging. It was Eden who broke the silence. She didn't tell us she was sick. "She wouldn't," Evelyn said softly. "She was always too busy saving everyone else." Eden looked at her. "Are you going to take her away from us again?" Evelyn flinched. "No," she said without hesitation. "Whatever happens next is yours to decide." Jack reappeared from the doctor's office. She's stable, unconscious but holding. They're moving her to cardiac intensive care. The girls exhaled together, as if they'd been holding the same breath. The next morning, Jack returned to the hospital with a bag of clothes and a thermos of coffee. The nurse at the front desk recognized him and waved him toward room 204. When he entered, Marla was awake. Barely. She looked thinner somehow, like a gust of wind could have taken her. But her eyes were open, and when she saw Jack, something like peace washed over her face. "You stayed," she whispered. Of course. She glanced at the window. Rain still streaked the glass. The girls downstairs, with Evelyn. Marla smiled faintly. "Never thought I'd say those words." Jack pulled the chair closer. "You scared them, you know." "I scared myself," she said. "I had a dream, Jack. I was in the trailer again, alone. But this time, there was no light, no sound, just cold. Like I had disappeared before I could say goodbye." He nodded. "You didn't. You're still here. I don't know for how long." Jack leaned forward. "Then make it count." She turned to him. "They need someone. If I don't." "Don't," he said firmly. "Don't write your ending yet." Tears welled in her eyes. "You're a good man. I'm just trying to do right by them." She closed her eyes. "Then maybe that's what makes you a father." That night, Eden and Willa were allowed into the room one at a time. Eden wheeled herself beside the bed and took her mother's hand. Marla looked at her with wonder, like she was memorizing her face. "You grew up brave," she said. "You gave us that." "I left you." Eden shook her head. "You protected us. Then you found your way back." Willa entered next. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She climbed into the chair beside the bed and placed a drawing on Marla's chest. 3 flowers. 1 tall, 2 small. All rooted in the same patch of soil, reaching toward a sun that looked suspiciously like a heart. Marla reached up with weak fingers and touched her daughter's cheek. A single tear slipped down Willa's face. Marla whispered, "I see you now. Both of you." Jack stood in the doorway, his chest tight. They hadn't said goodbye. But they had said enough. The first thing Marla saw when she woke was a paper heart taped to the IV pole. Drawn in red crayon, unevenly folded, it read in block letters, "We missed you before we even knew you were gone. Eden and Willa." It was the kind of message that didn't need polish or poetry, just truth. And that morning, truth was everything. Sunlight streamed gently through the hospital window, warmer now, like even the sky had decided to soften. Marla blinked against the light, her body still heavy, but her heart lighter than she'd felt in years. She wasn't alone anymore. Jack sat nearby, nodding off in a chair, hair-tousled chin tilted to his chest. A disposable coffee cup rested precariously on the armrest. She watched him sleep for a moment, watched the way he breathed, steady and calm. He was the kind of man you didn't see coming until everything was on fire, and he was the one holding the bucket. She smiled faintly. "Jack," she rasped. He stirred, blinking awake. When his eyes focused on her, something flickered in them, something unguarded and quiet. "You're up," he said softly. "Apparently." He stood rubbing the back of his neck. "The girls have been waiting to see you. I told them I'd check first." Marla nodded. "How long have I been here?" 3 days. "You've been in and out." Her eyes widened. 3. "You gave us all a scare." Marla glanced at the window. "I don't want to miss any more time." Jack moved to the door. "Then let's not waste another minute." Down the hallway, Evelyn sat beside Eden in the family lounge, a crossword puzzle forgotten on her lap. She had traded her designer blazer for a soft cardigan, her heels for flat-soled shoes. It wasn't a transformation, it was a quiet shedding. "You should have seen your mother when she started at the clinic," Evelyn was saying. She was young and furious. The kind of person who couldn't walk past a closed door without wondering who was trapped behind it. Eden tilted her head. Why did you hate her? Evelyn paused, not flinching, just facing it. Because she reminded me of the parts of myself I'd locked away. Because she loved without calculation. And because she made Roderick laugh in ways I never could. Eden considered that. You loved him. More than I knew how to show. Willa was curled on a nearby couch, sketchbook open across her lap. She hadn't spoken all morning, but she had drawn her hand, moving slowly, intentionally. Jack entered the room and nodded once. She's awake. You can go in. The girls exchanged a glance, then moved without hesitation. Willa led the way. When they entered the hospital room, Marla opened her arms. No words, no hesitation. Eden rolled forward and laid her head against her mother's shoulder. Willa climbed up beside them, resting her hand lightly on Marla's heart. The monitor beeped steadily. So did life. I'm sorry, Marla whispered. We already forgave you, Eden replied. We just hadn't said it out loud. I wanted to come back for you sooner, she said, voice breaking. But you did, Willa said softly. It was the first time she had spoken since the hospital. Marla froze, then cried openly, fully, without shame, and her daughters held her like she'd never been gone at all. That afternoon, the hospital let Marla sit outside in a wheelchair under the shade of a white birch tree. Her skin looked pale, but her eyes were bright with life again. Evelyn sat across from her. You could have told me, Evelyn said, about the girls, about everything. I didn't think you'd care. I didn't. Then, Evelyn admitted. But I do now. Marla studied her. Why Evelyn looked toward Eden and Willa, who were playing a card game on the grass nearby. Jack knelt beside them, helping reshuffle a messy pile with a patient grin. Because when I saw them, I saw him. Roderick. And I realized I had failed him too. Marla said nothing. I want to help, Evelyn continued. Not just financially. I want to be present. Real. I want to make amends. You don't get to buy your way into their lives. I know, Evelyn said. But maybe I can build my way in. One honest brick at a time. Marla nodded slowly. Then start with listening. 2 weeks later, Pine Hollow witnessed something it hadn't seen in years. Neighbors gathered around the small chapel at the edge of town, where the white paint had begun to peel, but the bell still worked. Wildflowers were tied in mason jars. Folded chairs lined the aisle. Marla walked slowly, arm in arm with Eden, wearing a sky-blue dress and a soft smile that still surprised her in the mirror. Willa followed close behind, carrying a bouquet she had assembled herself. Sunflowers, baby's breath, and wild roses. Jack stood at the front, nervously adjusting his collar. He wore his best pair of boots and a tie that didn't quite sit right, but no one noticed. All they saw was the way he looked at her, as if he had been waiting years for something he never believed he'd be lucky enough to find. The ceremony was brief, honest, intimate. Jack took Marla's hand and said, I don't want to replace what you lost. I just want to be part of what you still have. And when they kissed, Eden clapped. Willa smiled. Evelyn, seated in the front row, wiped away tears she didn't try to hide. Later that night, under the stars, Eden wheeled out onto the porch holding a candle. She lit it and set it on the railing. What's that for? Jack asked, stepping beside her. For the time we lost, she said, and for what we found. Inside, Willa hung her latest drawing above the fireplace, a house with 3 windows, each one lit. Inside one, a man. In another, a woman. In the center, 2 girls hand in hand. Home, at last. Fall came early that year. The trees around Pine Hollow turned gold, like old pages in a treasured book, and the wind carried with it the smell of wood smoke apples, and something else, something harder to name. Maybe it was healing, or maybe it was peace finally putting down roots. Willa sat under the elm tree near the back fence, legs tucked beneath her sketchbook resting on her lap. She wasn't drawing. Not today. Today she was listening. Inside the house, Marla was humming softly in the kitchen, leaning on the counter with a mug of tea and a heartbeat steady enough to trust again. She wasn't fully recovered, but she was here. She was present. She was alive. And that was everything. Eden rolled out onto the porch, wrapped in a knitted shawl that Evelyn had made herself. The old woman had taken to visiting twice a week now sometimes, to teach the girls chess, sometimes to simply sit in silence and let the years breathe. Jack joined Eden, 2 mugs in hand. Apple cider, stolen straight from Marla's reserve. Eden smirked. "You're a bold man." He grinned, reckless, really. They sat quietly watching Willa in the yard, and the wind scattered a few dry leaves at their feet. "You know," Eden said softly, "she's saying more." I noticed. Not just with drawings, real words, quiet but clear. She started whispering them to me at night. Sometimes names, sometimes memories. Last night she said, "Daddy." Jack's heart skipped. He swallowed. "Do you think she meant me?" Eden smiled at him. Maybe. Maybe not. But she said it with love. Later that week, Jack drove Willa to Lubbock for a follow-up appointment with the speech pathologist. It wasn't something she liked, but it was something she was beginning to own. After the session, they stopped by a bookstore. Willa wandered into the children's aisle, where a quiet woman in a denim jacket was reading aloud to 2 toddlers. Jack leaned on a shelf nearby, watching Willa pick out a book and sit down cross-legged on the rug. Then she did something unexpected. She read a line out loud, softly, haltingly, but unmistakably. The woman beside her looked up, startled. Jack didn't move. Willa read the sentence again, and again, until it came out whole. When she looked up and saw Jack's eyes shining, she blushed, but she didn't stop. Outside, as they walked to the truck, Jack said, "You're brave, you know." Willa tilted her head. "No," he continued, "not just because you spoke, but because you didn't wait for perfect. You just tried. And that's what changes things." Willa opened her sketchbook. Inside was a drawing of a door cracked open, and through it, sunlight. That weekend, the town held its annual autumn festival. This time, Eden helped design the flyers. Willa entered her art in the youth showcase again, only this time she signed it herself. Willa Dane. Jack noticed the name and caught Marla's eye. She gave a small nod. "She asked me last week," Marla said, "if it was okay to use his name." Jack said nothing, just reached for her hand and held it tight. At the festival, Evelyn surprised everyone by sponsoring a small scholarship in Roderick's name for children overcoming adversity through art. It wasn't flashy, just a quiet offering. She didn't make a speech. Instead, she handed the first certificate to Willa, with a handwritten note that simply read, "You are the legacy he never got to live, but always would have chosen." Willa clutched it against her chest like treasure. That night after the festival, the family returned to the cabin under a sky scattered with stars. They sat around a fire pit roasting marshmallows, laughing in half whispers. Marla leaned into Jack's shoulder. Eden held a thermos of cider in her lap, eyes flickering with light, and something more, contentment maybe, or belonging. Willa stood quietly a few feet away, her sketchbook at her side. She turned toward them, the fire behind her, and opened her mouth. "Mom," she said. Marla froze. "Yes, sweetheart." Willa stepped forward. Her voice was small, unsure. I love you." Time stopped. Marla covered her mouth with both hands. Tears fell freely, and she reached out. Willa ran into her arms, then turned to Jack. "I love you too." Jack could barely breathe. He bent down, eyes wet, and whispered, "I love you more than you'll ever know." Willa nodded, then looked up at the stars, and softly, clearly she spoke one last word. Home. The next morning, the drawing appeared on the fridge. It showed a family standing together, Marla, Jack, Eden, and Willa under a golden tree. Above them in Willa's careful script were just 3 words. We stayed found. And for once in their lives, they truly had. Before you go, we'd love to know where in the world are you watching from today. It's always heartwarming to see this little corner of the internet connect with kind souls from all over. If this story touched you in any way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We share true-to-the-heart stories just like this every week, filled with hope, second chances, and the quiet power of love. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Until next time, take care of yourself, and never stop believing in the good that still exists in this world.